Item 10B, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the contract with West Yost Associates for construction management and inspection services for the water pump station number 4 College project in the amount of $29,633.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the Council. My name is Will Anderson, Staff Engineer, Public Services Department. Construction of the new water pump station number 4 on College Drive at Skyline Boulevard is nearing completion. The project is the second most critical water system improvement listed in the Water Master Plan and serves as the only source of water to Pressure Zone 11, an area that includes Skyline College and the surrounding neighborhoods. Due to the complexity of the project, Council authorized the execution of a contract back in September 2014 for construction management services with West Yost Associates to monitor the structural, mechanical, electrical, and piping installations. The cost of their initial contract was approximately $170,000. The proposed amendment will increase the contract amount by $29,633 for a total contract amount of approximately $200,000. The additional costs are required to continue management and inspection of the project until it is completed because we have fallen behind schedule on the construction schedule. But overall project costs are currently within budget and are forecasted to remain so. We're about 4 months behind schedule, primarily because of 2 unforeseen changes. The first being the new electrical service changing from overhead to underground, and the second being increasing the 2-day operational test period of the station to a 30-day time period prior to the city taking ownership of the station. For the electrical service, the plans as bid showed an overhead electrical feed to the new station. The service installation drawings were received from PG&E after construction started, and they showed an underground installation instead. This is actually a better design because an underground service would be less subject to corrosion in the consistently foggy areas at the site. So we had to develop a trenchless installation across Skyline Boulevard. The city obtained an encroachment permit from Caltrans for the crossing of Skyline, and the contractor negotiated with the private property owner across the street on Berkshire Drive to allow for placement of boring pits. All of this resulted in a 10-week time extension to the project. The 30-day test period was increased from the initial 2-day test period in the plans per city request to more thoroughly test the station under a range of operating conditions before the city takes ownership of the station. The proposed contract extension will allow for West Yost to continue their current construction management duties until project completion, and it is anticipated that this will be the first and last amendment to their contract. The additional money is available within the Water Enterprise Fund, and it is recommended that Council approve the contract amendment for construction management and inspection with West Yost. That's the end of my presentation.
All right.
Open to questions.
Thank you, Will. Any questions? Ken?
What was the original length of the project?
1 year.
1 year. So now we're 1 year, 4 months.
Correct.
So take me back. If you'd known, and I'm finding it very surprising that you would not know what the electrical service is, whether it's overhead or underground. And for one, is that something that should have been caught? That's going to be my first reaction. The second is, what if we did catch it early on? How different would that have made the project? Would there still have been a delay? Would there, would the construction schedule be lengthened because of this change in the electrical service?
Well, to answer the first part, when we made the initial service application, PG&E asked us when the service would be required. So the thought was, we're going to need service once the project is out of the ground, the electrical components are in place, and we need to to power up the station. But the question probably should have been, when was PG&E's design required, so that we could have planned accordingly, you know, by installing the appropriate conduits, including it in the bid docs. There was some miscommunications between us and PG&E.
Also, Councilmember Rivera, the existing station across the street, that has an overhead power. So during the design, the conceptual design, it was assumed that the same power would be extended over. So we didn't really consider any alternatives. And usually what you do is you start the project, and at some point during the design, you send the package to PG&E. And by the time PG&E gets to it and starts the actual design, all these constraints and other variables do not come into play.
Okay, so the second part of my question is that if we had known that this was going to be an underground service, I guess assuming that it is a little more involved than just shifting an overhead line, now you're putting it underground. Does that logically extend the construction?
It would actually, because you actually have to have all the equipment prepared on the receiving side in order to be able to do you could do some parallel connection, but the thing is that usually PG&E comes in and does the design, and they want to do it in one shot, do the connection in one shot. We could have done some in parallel. For example, maybe we could have done the boring and just put a conduit in and then pull the wires later, but part of it would have been extending the construction as we are now.
And just trying to understand what $30,000 in additional construction management is. Is he just sitting around waiting for you to finish things up for him to look at, or is there additional work for them for Yoast to be doing?
It is additional work. West Yoast has been excellent in providing us with support, and every dollar that we spent with them, in the past, has been useful. They have one of the best inspections that we've ever seen on any other projects, and we're very happy with what they're providing, especially with this very essential and crucial pump station. We wanted to make sure everything is done per specifications, and electrical is one of the biggest obstacles that we had to overcome.
Okay.
Any other question, Rico?
Sure. So, because of the miscommunication, the project designer then made an assumption on how it was going to go, and this is one of the issues that we're having here that's before us this evening, for the additional costs, correct? Or am I saying that wrong?
Due to the assumptions that weighed at the beginning of the project, during the preliminary design, we make certain assumptions. What is the condition of the soil? What is the condition of the electrical? What is the connections going to be? And at every point, those assumptions will be tested out in the field. For example, there's a big storm pipe underneath here, and we had to make that assumption. At some point, what are we going to do during the design? We had to make some changes because our original assumptions were not correct. So all of this is part of starting from the conceptual design to the final design. These assumptions will get impacted, and some of them actually will be tested during the construction. You start doing the piers, you don't know. You make an assumption that there's certain kind of geotechnical condition underneath, but when you actually drill the pier, you may encounter underwater springs, you may encounter underwater conditions that are very different.
Okay, so in hindsight, looking back, now knowing what we know as we sit here this evening, what would you suggest, or what better could we have done or can do in the future so that the miscommunications or assumptions that are made based on those don't find themselves rearing their head again?
That's an excellent question. Like you said, we need to learn. We need to learn. And as we work with these consultants, these are the best experts we have in the field. There are so many different variables that we have to consider and options. So in the future, one of the things that we can do is it's not a normal procedure, for example, for PG&E to have a pre-design conference. They normally don't get into their design people, don't really get the package until well into the project in order to provide the service. So for this part, we can look at other alternatives that might impact the schedule or the cost in terms of utilities that is not under our control. We could be more proactive in working with them and trying to push them to sit down with us and actually look at alternatives for providing different kind of service, including the power to the project.
Michael?
Through the chair. So one thing I'm trying to understand, so had we known in the very beginning that the power was going to be undergrounded, would the project have cost the same that we're paying now, or are we paying more as a penalty for having discovered it later?
It would have been an additional cost. Either we pay it upfront as part of the bid, we probably get a slightly lower cost to that effect, but, you know, because it was discovered during construction, it is an added cost, and it's probably higher than what we would have paid for had it been included in the bid.
But we can assume that the initial bid, had we known that, probably would have been close to this 199,000, or at least higher than the 169,000 that was originally proposed.
Yeah, the cost that we want to address, we have a consultant cost that's before you, and this is the cost of the construction management portion. We also have the construction cost, which is total of $2.5 million. That included only the overhead connection of the power. So what's before you is the additional cost we're incurring just for the construction management, not the actual
So
construction.
if we had known, if we had known everything that we should have known in the beginning, what would the bid, the construction management bid, have been closer to the 199 or somewhat close to that 199?
That is correct.
Okay.
It would have been closer to the 199 number because of the amount of time it takes and the extent of the complexity of what exactly will be reviewed. Mostly is a time impact. That's how construction management is designed, basically.
Okay.
When you come up with the number, it depends on the staffing and the length of time.
Right. And that's kind of what I was trying to get to, is that we're not really paying that much of a penalty for having missed it. It's just what it costs. If we had found it up front, we still would have agreed to pay it up front rather than backing into it at this point.
You're correct.
Okay. Now, as far as the 30-day extension, how come we didn't know that one up front?
Well, the bid docs only included a 2-day operational test period, and I guess that one, to be honest, it just kind of slipped through the cracks. I guess there were just 2 volumes worth of specifications, and we couldn't really catch everything. But here again, we're kind of catching it later in the game. Even though it did slip through the cracks, it didn't shatter on the floor at this point. So I think it's time well spent so we can fully test all the components in the station over a lengthy period and under various operating conditions. So here again, it was an oversight.
Is there a test plan that's out there somewhere that kind of runs through all the tests that need to happen and whether there's a duration to each one of those tests?
Yes, there are specific procedures for, you know, the electrical, the pumps, even the chlorine analyzers. There's just lots of bits and pieces within the station, and they are all being thoroughly tested prior to the city taking ownership of the station.
Okay. I mean, it's not our first well, so I'm surprised we missed that one. That one seems kind of obvious. Right? We've run through these tests with other wells when they were
Pump station.
pump station. Right. Pump
Right.
station.
This is actually the largest pump stations that we ever built in the city, and it's much more complex than the other pump stations we've had. So the amount of testing for this particular pump station, we want to make sure we don't leave any room for error. We want to do a complete testing, and this period would be very crucial to our staff to make sure that the pump station will be operating. This pump station is going to take water up to tanks 9 and 10 up in Skyline. and it's going to be very crucial, especially it's so close to the San Andreas Fault. And the amount of capacity that the motors have with the connection with the vicinity of the fault is going to be very important to our operations. So we want to make sure we do it correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Action by the council?
I'll introduce the resolution.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.